Opening the center immediately claims vital space and prepares for rapid development of bishops and queen. Embracing asymmetry from the start, this Sicilian defense immediately challenges White's central ambitions, setting up a dynamic fight for control. Developing the knight to a central outpost prepares for central pawn expansion and pressure. Black signals a desire for a solid pawn structure, potentially leading to a closed position where piece maneuvering will be paramount. Challenging the center immediately, opening lines for your pieces and contesting Black's space. Black surrenders central influence, opening lines for White's pieces and a potential kingside attack later. Unleashing the knight, White aims to seize central space and prepare for rapid development, eyeing the d5 square for future influence. Preparing for a pawn push to control central squares, this gambit offers dynamic counterplay. Developing the bishop here prepares for kingside castling and adds pressure, along the long diagonal toward Black's undeveloped queenside. Developing the knight to its natural outpost prepares for castling and challenges the central pawn structure. Securing the monarch to the flank enables bolder middle game ambitions. Solidifying the center and preparing for a pawn advance, this move subtly redirects the strategic battle. Boldly challenging the center, this advance ignites a dynamic struggle for space and initiates kingside pawn play. Developing this knight offers immediate support for the e-pawn and prepares for queenside expansion, subtly challenging White's central grip. Preparing a kingside pawn storm, this maneuver eyes a potential g4 advance while defending the knight and centralizing the queen for future action. Unleashing the knight's potential, this develops a key piece and prepares to challenge White's central control, potentially opening lines for counterplay. Securing the king's safety after developing pieces is paramount. This prophylactic maneuver creates an escape square. Solidifying the king's defense by preparing for the rook lift and enabling piece mobility is the primary aim. Constricting Black's queenside mobility, this move prepares for a central pawn storm and limits the scope of the nc5. Trading off that knight now simplifies the structure, but opens the d-file for potential future pressure. Reclaiming the center with the queen immediately puts pressure on Black's potentially exposed king. A crucial step towards securing the king and preparing to develop the remaining pieces for active play. Reasserting central presence, this knight aims to bolster the d4 pawn's security and prepare for a potential pawn break. Rerouting the knight to a more active square, aiming to influence the center and potentially challenge White's pawn structure. Reinforcing the queenside pawn structure prepares for potential queenside expansion and secures the knight's influence. Preparing to challenge the e-file and potentially free up the knight's path forward. Solidifying the queenside and preparing to contest the d-file, this bishop repositions for an active role. Anchoring the bishop here prepares for a potential queenside pawn push while reinforcing central control. Concentrating forces on the d-file, aiming to pry open lines and exploit potential weaknesses on Black's queenside. Solidifying the queenside pawn structure, this move prepares for potential queenside expansion while anticipating White's plans. Unleashing the e-pawn creates immediate central dynamic and threatens to unravel Black's queenside structure. Sensing the pressure on the kingside, the bishop retreats to a more robust diagonal, aiming to solidify defensive structures and perhaps prepare for a queenside counterplay. Opening the central file creates immediate pressure and forces Black to react defensively. The queen boldly enters the fray, eyeing open lines and potentially pressuring White's king. Unveiling the king's retreat route, White aims to exploit the e-file pressure while preparing a queenside expansion. Exchanging queens relinquishes the initiative and initiates a positional battle on open lines. Opening the h-file dramatically injects activity and potential into the kingside pawn structure. Re-establishing the d-file's potency becomes paramount, as the centralized pawns offer little immediate defense for the kings. Unleashing the pawn storm on the king's side, White bravely sacrifices material to pry open lines and target Black's vulnerable monarch. Re-establishing the knight's presence in the center, this move aims to improve piece activity and contest key squares. Opening the f-file decisively can unlock powerful attacking possibilities against black's somewhat uncoordinated pieces. Reclaiming the central file, black aims to disrupt white's kingside pawn structure and open avenues for counterplay. King's safety evaporates with this decisive pawn sacrifice, opening a terrifying diagonal. The king now ventures into a precarious central position, exposing vulnerabilities that white will surely aim to exploit. Asserting control of the light squares, this bishop aims to harass the black king and create attacking prospects on the queen side. Reclaiming the open d-file is paramount, a vital step toward developing a counterattack. Finally, clearing the diagonal for your remaining bishop, setting up a potential queenside pawn advance. Reclaiming the rook solidifies your structure and prepares to contest the crucial central file, but be mindful of potential pawn weaknesses. Reasserting central influence, the knight heads toward the kingside, aiming to disrupt black's consolidation. Recapturing the rook now leaves white's kingside structure somewhat compromised, potentially weakening the light squares around black's king. Recapturing the rook immediately secures the open file, clearing the path for your remaining pieces to participate. Consolidating your king's safety amidst the chaos, aiming to activate this piece for the coming endgame struggle. Consolidating the king's safety behind the pawn shield is a prudent, yet passive, step. Restoring the rook to the central file aims to create activity and potentially challenge white's control over the d-file. Unlocking the e-file, the rook immediately probes the enemy king's weak defense. Exposing the king to that open file demands an immediate defensive posture, a vital realignment to prevent further penetration. A calculated repositioning aiming to exploit the open file and potentially disrupt black's centralized king. Focusing the rook on the d-file now solidifies central control and prepares for potential piece exchanges. Unleashing a pawn avalanche, white aims to break open lines for his rook and create immediate threats on the queen side. Opening the b-file here offers a sliver of counterplay, but neglects critical central pawn structure repair. Opening a decisive diagonal, this tempo gain forces a crucial king retreat. King's safety is paramount, and this retreat secures the monarch from immediate checks along the d-file. Snatching that pawn immediately activates the knight, threatening a fork and dominating the center. Reasserting central influence, this bishop seeks to disrupt white's knight pair and prepare for a pawn push. This pawn push aims to disrupt black's compact setup and potentially open lines for white's rook, but it weakens the kingside pawn structure. Cementing the pawn structure, this move awkwardly blocks the bishop's development and creates a potential outpost for white's knight on f5. Reasserting control over the open files will be key to leveraging white's central pawn majority. The black king faces a precarious journey through this open board, needing to find a secure haven amidst the active enemy pieces. Reigniting pressure on the e-file, this knight repositions to renew threats and coordinate the attack. Snatching the knight creates immediate tactical chaos, but neglects the open king's safety. Seizing the initiative, the knight fork threatens mate and wins material. Reclaiming the knight allows for counterplay and opens the door to potential tactical fireworks. Reignite tactical possibilities and pressure the disorganized black pieces. This pawn push disrupts white's knights and aims to create a passed pawn on the queen side, a crucial endgame objective. The rook redeploys to the open file, seeking greater activity and preparing to pressure black's weakened kingside. The king's relocation to f7 sacrifices a tempo, potentially inviting immediate tactical complications and weakening its defensive position. Repositioning the knight to support the passed pawn's advance is the key idea here. Reactivating the bishop after a long slumber on the queenside reclaims some queenside influence and prepares for a more dynamic middle game development. Shifting the knight to f2 initiates a potential kingside attack, aiming to exploit the weakened pawn structure. Recapturing the knight abandons the last chance for active defense, solidifying white's central control and promising endgame advantage. Unleashing a decisive check, this knight fork aims to shatter black's remaining defense and swiftly simplify towards a winning material advantage.